It is Fed Day. Normally we say, we're in a holding pattern waiting for the Fed rate decision. And the Fed rate decision, we're not expecting a change in policy, are we? But there could be a lot of emphasis on whether we get anything slightly dovish or slightly hawkish from the Fed versus current market expectations.
Yeah, it's an interesting Fed decision, good morning, Anna, because it's going to have a big impact on short-term trading, but not really change the medium-term picture at all. So I think a couple of weeks from now, we'll not care about this Fed meeting because there's still too much uncertainty about ultimately what policies get sustained or delivered and sustained on trade and how they then feed through to the economy. So what the Fed does in a few months from now will still be will not be clarified tonight. And that's why I don't think this changes any of the macro picture. But in the short term, it really makes a big difference because everyone's very uncertain how much the Fed will react in the short term to what we've seen so far from the new administration, what the indications are we're going to get. And therefore, there's massive short-term trading opportunities, but not long-term macro story here to consider.
Mark, if the Fed is uncertain, can I assume that the BOJ is uncertain and the ECB is uncertain and the Bank of England's uncertain? If the Fed is basically sitting on its hands, do other central banks have to do the same thing? Yes, the Fed is a leader, but I think there's much more idiosyncratic stories in other examples you've mentioned there, particularly the ECB has a very different story in its own fiscal spend. And I think importantly, what's happening in the world at the moment is a little bit of deglobalization, so a little bit more independence in those themes. I also think the BOJ is an idiosyncratic story in terms of that we've seen a BOJ that sounded a little bit more hawkish than people expected today, and potentially just a general risk aversion is helping the yen as well. But that's partially because Ueda couldn't say anything about the domestic politics situation. And I think that will maybe restrain the BOJ. So I think that the gains we're seeing on the yen out of the BOJ right now are possibly quite short-lived because ultimately the BOJ may struggle to hike amid the domestic political turmoil that is happening. Ishiba is a main supporter of him hiking more aggressively. And so if he is undermined, that certainly changes the picture there. So yes, Fed is a leader. It sets the tone, but that kind of leadership role is being slightly undermined at the margin.
OK, so there's deglobalization, perhaps, of policy making, but even so, the BOJ a little limited in where it can move to. That sort of economic nationalism or a bigger role for domestic factors takes me to US exceptionalism, Mark, and whether that's still a reassessment of that exceptionalism in stocks and the dollar is really the thing that is still dominating market conversation.
That is very much so. But I mean, I think the story has been concluded. US exceptionalism is over. We've now seen that, US share of global market cap is around 47.5% from close to 51% at the start of February. It's been an incredible decline. So US stocks have massively underperformed, and that is going to be a long-term theme that will sustain.